We're gonna win that.
We're going to start in about 1 minute, so if folks could start sitting down, I would appreciate it.
All right, Sean.
All right, well, thank you all. Is this mic on? I hope it is. Thank you all for coming. Happy Earth Day. Happy 56th Earth Day. And I want to start as one I think has to, if you want to be taken seriously, by being really, really depressing. April 1970, the first Earth Day, there was 325 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. I just looked yesterday, and we were at 430. 1970, the average temperature on the planet, the global average temperature was 51.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Last year, it was 57.6. I know we always talk about 1.5 degrees of warming. I'm using Fahrenheit because we're America. But that's meaningful. Global sea levels are 6 inches higher on average than they were in 1970 on the first Earth Day. That's on average. If you're on the coasts and in warmer areas, particularly on the Gulf Coast, it's come up even more than that. Those numbers are all super scary. Now, I was born in 1971, which means I do not remember the first Earth Day. But I graduated from college in 1993. And if you want to give some sense of progress or the lack thereof, 50% of all the CO2 that humanity has emitted as a species since we first learned how to build a fire hundreds of thousands of years ago, 50% of all the CO2 we've emitted as a species is since I graduated from college. This is the reality. We can be sad about it. We can be energized to do something about it, but we can't ignore that truth, no matter how much some of my colleagues across the aisle think that the laws of physics, like the laws of the United States, are negotiable. At the same point, there's going to be the end of my depressing part. Dennis Hayes, who's one of the co-founders of Earth Day, has become a good friend, and I love Dennis because he is so eternally optimistic and positive. And I think my biggest message, particularly to the younger folks here, is that the spirit of that first Earth Day was to be bone-curdlingly honest about the reality of what had happened to our planet, but at the same time energize folks to act, that we all have agency in this, and the worst thing we can do is to be paralyzed by fear. And that the hope, such as it is that it is in our interest to make the transition. We know how to make the transition. We have lots of people of good moral character who are prepared to make the transition. We have a small number of people of low moral character in certain positions of power, but that is also a fixable problem. And grateful to be here. One of the things that gives me the greatest optimism going forward is that we have so many members of Congress in the House and the Senate. Some of the brightest lights are the ones sitting around me who have thought and legislated in great detail on the specific issues that we have to grapple with. And it would be a much darker time if we were still at a third grade reading level, which we are decidedly not, and as you'll see around the table. The other thing that I'm optimistic about is that while we are not moving fast enough, the private market understands it. We are not building coal plants in the United States right now. We are building a lot of solar. We're building a lot of wind. We're deploying a lot of batteries. The people are driving EVs. None of that is because they're woke. It's because they're greedy, and it's really preferable to not have to pay for energy. The single best thing you can do to lower your costs is to invest in energy efficiency, invest in renewables, and we're seeing markets going through and doing that. And I think a lot of the pushback we're seeing from the White House is that mediocre people don't like competition because they don't win, but competition's winning. So with that in mind, I guess I'd ask all my colleagues around the table to be bone-curdlingly honest with us about the areas of your expertise, but give us a little hope too, because we want everybody to come out of here uplifted. And with that, do I have the order here? I don't know if I have the order. I think Senator Whitehouse, are you up next? Yes? I guessed right. Senator Whitehouse.
All right. I'm going to make 4 points, so I'm going to make them fast. One is that climate hushing, which is much talked about, is an extremely stupid idea. The reason, this is my second point, the reason that climate hushing is an extremely stupid idea is that climate change has moved from the science department to the economics department. And it's now showing up through people's mail slots in the home insurance crisis that is bedeviling a great many states and the electric utility rates crisis that is bedeviling a great many states. Both are going to get worse, so it's important for us to be prepared not only for today but for the worst that it's going to get. In the Senate, we focus on cost and corruption as two prevailing themes. This hits both of those. With respect to home insurance, the cost is immense. It's often the biggest expense a family faces, and when it doubles or it becomes unavailable, it is a nightmare. And the reason that it's going up is because the other party won't treat climate change seriously, and the reason they won't is that their pockets are stuffed with fossil fuel money. So it's cost for families, corruption on the Republican side. Electricity bills, same. The Trump administration is driving clean energy off the grid, which means that inexpensive energy is not available, which forces the grid higher up the generation stack to fossil fuel units that are more expensive and with good clean energy wouldn't even be running. It creates a direct transfer of billions of ratepayer dollars, American consumer dollars, into the pockets of Trump's big fossil fuel donors. It is a massive scam and fraud on the American public. So both cost and corruption are hit. And by the way, while we're at it, while we're making this argument, remember, even with children's stories, they're better with a villain. Trolls, giants, witches. This is a story that is rife with villains, and we need to start talking about the climate denial fraud operation, the dark money corruption operation, and call those things out. Last point. We know now that because of the time we've wasted thanks to all of that fraud and corruption, that we now have to narrow our focus to what is truly essential. And what is truly essential is that the free-to-pollute business model must die. There is no longer a pathway to climate safety if the fossil fuel industry continues to enjoy a free-to-pollute business model. Simply doesn't work any longer. So we have to we can talk about a lot of different things, but if we aren't ending fossil fuels free-to-pollute business model, we are consigning ourselves to failure, and we shouldn't do that. So those are the thoughts that I bring, and I thank you very much, Chairman, I guess, for hosting me here, and I'm so glad my distinguished colleague from Massachusetts nearby is here as well.
Before you go, Senator Whitehouse, I want to thank you for traveling to St. Petersburg, Florida, to listen to my neighbors who are just being crushed by rising property insurance rates that come at a rotten time because everything else is high.
Yep.
But and that was before my community was devastated by Hurricanes Helene and Milton. What does the data show relating to insurance premium increases? What are people going to be grappling with unless we develop some solutions?
Well, in most Florida counties, they're expected to double, triple, or quadruple from the already highest level in the country, average about $14,000. You double or triple that, and you've basically hammered the value of that home, and that is why you're seeing Florida property values actually starting to decline. It's part of the forecast cascade from climate risk to insurance crisis to mortgage crisis to property value crash to recession. We are in that slide right now, and we need to point that out to people. On the political side, in Florida, 48% of Trump voters assign the homeowners insurance crisis they're experiencing to climate change. All the lies out of the fossil fuel industry, all the nonsense out of the Trump administration, and half of his voters look at their homeowners insurance crisis and they understand that it relates to climate change. So we've got, in fact, kind of a wide open political door to walk through. It's 66% connecting it to climate-driven extreme weather in red state oil patch Texas. So, and by the way, 92% of Texas voters are concerned about the cost of their homeowners insurance. That is a higher number than health care, and it's a higher number than groceries, and it's a higher number than home ownership in Texas. So when more people are concerned about the cost of home insurance in Texas than own homes, you know that issue has really penetrated into the ideology and the thought patterns of the state.
Governor DeSantis was unable to join us today, but I'm sure he is listening in on Zoom.
He's at a fundraiser held by the Florida insurance industry.
6 of the 7 most uninsured counties in the country are in Florida. The other one is Harris County in Texas. This is Miami-Dade, Broward County. So it's not just an insurance crisis. It's individual homeowners who are going to be left exposed. It's scary. Senator Markey, uplift us on the endangerment finding.
And it's great to be home. I do feel like I'm home when I'm over here. And thank you, Congressman Casson. Thank you to all the Sikh members, all the climate justice leaders who are gathered around the table here today. Today is Earth Day. And Earth Day is different this year because for the first time in 16 years, the Environmental Protection Agency no longer acknowledges that greenhouse gases endanger public health and welfare. It was 16 years ago that the Supreme Court decided in Massachusetts versus EPA that there had to be a decision made on the endangerment to our country by greenhouse gases. And we brought the suit in Massachusetts because of the endangerment to our coastline. And the EPA ultimately had to, in fact, promulgate an endangerment finding because the evidence was there. And the solutions that were put on the books, whether it be fuel economy standards for the vehicles that we drive, whether it be the emissions that come out of utility plants, it all goes back to that decision. There is a danger, an endangerment to our country. And that is what then propelled a lot of the changes which we are and have been seeing. But in February, EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, he repealed the endangerment finding, the scientific underpinning of standards to reduce emissions and fight climate change. And by repealing the endangerment finding, the Trump administration is now presenting a clear and present danger to the public because climate denial costs lives. In the year 2000, we had 3 events in America, climate-related, that caused $1 billion worth of damage. 2 years ago, 27 events that caused more than $1 billion a year in damage. Okay? So much of it is already built into the system, and it's only going to intensify as each year goes by. And with the repeal, the Trump administration is saying that climate-fueled hurricanes and wildfires and record-breaking heat pose no danger to the public. They're not even going to look at what the public health implications are. That is the dangerous place in which American citizens have now been placed. And a statement that ridiculous doesn't just endanger our health, it endangers our common sense. Trump and Zeldin don't want us to believe the decades of undisputed evidence that the climate crisis is real. They've taken a page straight out of George Orwell's 1984. And this is what he wrote. He said, "The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears." And so, yeah, it's invasion of the body snatchers. These Republicans, they are occupied, and they do not have an ability to speak. And they've been put in a witness protection program where they're not allowed to speak on any of these issues any longer for fear of the endangerment of their seats, which is why they have to pass the SAVE Act. Because the SAVE Act is really the Save Their Asses Act, because the public is coming for them because of climate issues, because of energy issues, and we now have the twin the twin apocryphal events. One is the energy apocalypse coming out of the Middle East, meeting now the already existing climate apocalypse. And we get a chance now to message both of those issues this year because they both affect people where they live. And so they're just asking us to reject our lungs, our hearts, and the impact on the health of families in our country. That's why it is so important for us to join together. And I thank you, all the Sikh members, for what you're doing. I joined with my colleagues here in organizing our state delegations to submit public comments on the repeal. And even if Trump and Zeldin try to put EPA science in shackles, the law is clear. We will win. And we have to organize, as we are, amongst amicus briefs to go ultimately to the highest courts in order to win that case. So that's where we are today. We have a real chance rallying around the dangers of saying there is no danger to the public health. And what we have to do is make this a campaign for November of 2026, and just say to the American public, we're running on these issues. We're running on clean energy as the solution to those twin apocalyptic events which are affecting families across our country. And after we win in January or February of 2027, we're just going to take the first reconciliation train and we're just going to stuff it with all of the tax breaks for wind and solar, all of the tax breaks for all electric vehicles, all of the tax breaks for all of the technologies which reduce greenhouse gases and endangering of the public. And we're going to do that at the first agenda item that we have in 2027 because it is urgent. So I thank you, Chairman Casson. I thank all of the great members here, my great friends who are gathered here from the House, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Markey, I have a question for you. First of all, thank you for your leadership over so many years, first in the House and now in the Senate. I know I was, let's say, more than disappointed but not surprised at the repeal of the endangerment finding. I represent Oregon, where we had a heat dome, and a couple years ago people died. And it makes no sense to ignore the health consequences of climate change, as you said. But how does this attack on the endangerment finding, how is it related to the overall attacks on science in general from this administration?
Well, whether it be NIH grants, whether it be National Science Foundation grants, whether it be the funding to to NOAA or to NASA or to every agency that had a role in climate change. It is a fundamental attack on science across the board. And I do think it's good for Democrats to run on science, to run on the facts. And to the extent to which actually fighting climate is an issue that does affect NIH research on the impacts of climate on families. There's a projection that 200,000 people could die in the United States from climate-related issues over the next 25 years. Asthmas are going to be on the rise. Lung disease is going to be on the rise in general. So all of this goes to the attack on science and the obvious evidence which has been presented that this is a clear and present danger, and that's why it's just so important for us to band together and make this a top priority once again in the election of 2026. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Markey. This is not planned, but I just got news that our colleague David Scott has passed. So friend, colleague from the Georgia Lifetime of Public Service, and
Oh my God.
it's heavy, but our thoughts are with him, with his family. A wise man once told me that every single person gets to be born and every single person gets to die, and the only exceptional thing we do is what we do in between. So, to David Scott and a life of exceptional public service. That's a completely unfair transition to you, Kathy Castor. But let me pass to my chair, Kathy Castor of the Climate Committee, with maybe some of the more hopeful things we're doing in the Thriving Economy Project.
Yeah, thank you, Rep. Caston. Well, good afternoon, everyone. On this Earth Day, I think it's more important than ever that we all come together to recommit to developing the solutions that we need to solve this climate crisis. It is such an honor, and it is hopeful to be here with all of you, with allies and friends that represent millions of Americans that understand that we must act now. And yet we look over at the administration and who's in the majority in the Congress, and it would be very easy to despair. But we're not going to let them get us down. In fact, we're going to work together to develop these solutions. I mean, it is absolutely soul-crushing out there, the cost of living. If it's not your grocery bill, it's your electric bill, or the fact they ripped away health care to provide big tax breaks for billionaires. But the cost of the heating climate are wearing on people. In my community, we are trying to get back on our feet after a 7.5-foot storm surge flooded out homes. You probably didn't have the insurance coverage to make you whole, so you are just trying to grapple with real life. Here's what we're going to do about it. And here's the good news. There are over 100 members just in the House of Representatives, and we had we have Senator Markey, Senator Whitehouse, who represent our brothers and sisters on the other side of the Capitol too, focused on developing solutions. What we're doing here through the Sustainable Energy and Environment Coalition with our partners is a forward-looking plan to develop a thriving economy to help answer many of these critical questions and develop the solutions. It's kind of a hearkening back to when we had the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis. Rep. Caston, Rep. Bonamici, Rep. Huffman were instrumental in developing the most detailed and well thought out plan for climate solutions in the history of politics in the United States. It provided the basis for the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and more. We're not going to let the fact that the fossil fuel industry is in charge of the White House and the Congress right now as they tear down many of those policies deter us. In fact, we're going to answer them with a new thriving economy project that answers the cost of living question, develops the solutions for affordability, looks to new areas to develop. Rep. Baczynski is going to lead the charge on answers in agriculture. Rep. Caston is looking at climate finance. In a community like mine, I'm listening to my neighbors who have been devastated by intense climate-fueled storms. We've now gone out across America with a request for information and have gotten back hundreds of responses. We've now received over 1,000 policy proposals. So right now we are listening. We are hammering out that thriving economy plan of action, and we hope to unleash it here in the next by fall. I want you all to stay tuned, but I don't want you just to wait. We need your answers and your help now. This is urgent, and we have on this Earth Day more of a moral responsibility than we've ever had to help lift up families and small businesses and people across this country and develop the policy proposals that we need to develop a thriving economy, one that isn't soul-crushing to the people we represent back home. This is urgent, Rep. Caston, so thank you for your energy in bringing us all together today.
Thank you. Thanks, Adelita. Thanks for all your leadership, Kathy. And I just want to say I'm so excited to be doing that agriculture chapter. And I know you're doing one. Yours is more on community resilience. And so I was just curious. I know Florida is probably the apex of all kinds of climate disasters, big events that are happening. But how did you look at your chapter on community resilience as you were putting it together for the project?
Yeah, thanks. Because we're going to have to adapt now, and there are ways to do this to help people save money. If you're experiencing wildfires, like Rep. Huffman and many of you in your districts have experienced, floods, droughts. It's not just these intense hurricanes that spring up. This is wearing on everyone. So we're looking at how do we adapt? How do we harden our infrastructure? How do we bring in clean energy and energy-efficient solutions to help lower the cost of living for our families and businesses back home? But we need the modern solutions. We need people's engagement now. Help us develop this thriving economy project to help answer the moral responsibility we have to solve the climate crisis. And I'm very excited about your ag chapter, too.
Thank you, Kathy. Now I want to turn over to the ranking member, soon to be chairman of the Natural Resources Committee, Jared Huffman, who also, just as an aside, if you ever are on a committee and you want to go after purveyors of disinformation, there's no one more fun to do it with. So, Jared, tell us about public lands.
Oh, Sean, they give us so much material to work with, don't they? It is great to be here. Thank you, Sean and Suzanne, for convening us. It seems to me that this is the opposite of a Trump cabinet meeting, where everyone sits around and sort of grovels.
It's because we're all sober.
There's that. That's Kegseth you're talking about. But no, we're not groveling before the dear leader and telling him how great and awesome he is. This is an honest reckoning of where we stand on Earth Day. This is what Earth Day should be all about. And I want to talk to you about the status of our shared natural resources and specifically public lands. First, I want to acknowledge, as the ranking member of the Natural Resources Committee, I've got some real champions with me from our great committee. All of these are great champions of climate and the environment, but I'm so glad to be here with Yasemin and with Melanie and with our great newest addition, Adelita. We got a heck of a good team at the Natural Resources Committee. So our public lands have never seen anything like the withering attacks from this administration ever. I mean, not in our entire history. And we've had some success in beating back some of the worst of it. We were able to stop a scheme to sell off our public lands, millions of acres of public lands, last year. But now Congressional Republicans have a new fetish, and that is using the Congressional Review Act, or the CRA, to try to really open Pandora's box and permanently undo public land management decisions. They're doing it at an unprecedented scale and breadth. And last week, we saw one of the worst examples of this, a stunning overreach, where they used the CRA to override a public land order that would have provided 20 years of protection to America's most visited wilderness area, the Boundary Waters in Minnesota. And this would pave the way for mining just outside of this pristine wilderness, and a type of mining that has a 100% record of failure and of pollution. This is copper nickel mining, which they've never done in this part of Minnesota. So this would put the boundary waters at extreme risk of polluted runoff, and there's not even really a serious debate about that. But it also sets a dangerous precedent where Congress is rolling back protections that could happen and apply to all sorts of other public lands. Very little oversight or notice when this happens, just politicians basically overriding carefully developed management plans so that our public lands can be exploited and desecrated by private industry. The Boundary Waters vote was the most recent, but there have been a bunch of these other votes in this Congress. And it's important to remember what land management plans are. They are carefully crafted by agency staff over a number of years usually. There's robust input from the public, including local communities, including tribes and other stakeholders. They're based on science. They're based on the public's interest and not just private interests. And letting Congress just override them with these CRA votes throws the entire system of our public land management into chaos. And the context for that chaos, of course, is that this administration is also hamstringing the agencies that we entrust to manage and protect our public lands. They have been gutting staff, proposing deep budget cuts, and proposing wild reorganization schemes like what they're doing with the Forest Service and with wildland firefighting right now. All of that as we're heading into what may be one of the worst fire seasons we've seen in a long, long time. So there's a lot of real danger facing our public lands, but beyond that, one of the other crazy threats to our public lands, and particularly to the National Park Service, is what the Trump administration is doing in service of Donald Trump's narcissism and his desire to rewrite American history. They are on a mad mission to remake the capital city in Trump's image. They want to erect a 250-foot tall Independence Arch, which is a tribute to Donald Trump. He has acknowledged that that's his intention. They're putting his names on buildings. Federal parkland is being desecrated in this capital city in ways that violate the law, that circumvent Congress. And perhaps the most damaging part of this ideological war is what they're doing with our history. Our national parks are the way we tell the story of America. And we want it to be the full and complete story with both the triumphs and the scars. That's what honest history is about. They are trying to whitewash all of that in deeply disturbing ways. So look, I'm working with all of my Democratic colleagues to do what Congress is supposed to do, to push back on all of these things, to ask hard questions. We're in the minority. We can't actually lead in official oversight proceedings, but we're doing what we can. And Sean, you asked us at the top to leave on a note of hope. So as we ask these hard questions and get no response from this administration, and as we watch all of our Republican colleagues just look away in the face of all of this extremism and damage, I want you to imagine what it might look like a year from now. And imagine real oversight being done by a Congress where Democrats are holding gavels and are setting the hearing agendas and are launching investigations that are backed up by subpoena power. That's going to be a very, very different situation, and I think it's reason for all of us to carry some hope into the coming days and weeks on this Earth Day. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Ranking Member Huffman. Thank you for your leadership. It's been great to learn from you and the committee. With all of the attacks that we've seen coming at us left and right, you talked about the future and when we're in the majority. What are some of the ways that we are fighting back now, even in the minority on the Natural Resources Committee? Yeah, well, come to any of our Natural Resource Committee meetings. We are calling these folks out for these naked giveaways to private industry, mining, for example. I don't think a week passes in this Congress that they're not trying to give even more away to the mining industry, and we are putting up a heck of a fight against that. We are writing really awesome letters
not getting any responses. But again, think about the difference when we're in the majority and those letters have to be responded to because our oversight will be backed by subpoena power. And the other thing that we're doing wherever we can is we are engaging to support litigants who are challenging many of these things in court. So I think many of you have joined on some of the amicus briefs that we have filed. We've had some court wins where they have held up some of these actions, both the arch and the ballroom and other activities. We're going to keep fighting in every one of these ways, but really we want to get the gavel so we can fight much more effectively.
Thanks. Look, this is a collective action problem, as you can tell. We are a selfish species. We struggle with collective action problems. No one has done a better job of advocating and thinking about the overwhelming majority of the planet on which our species does not live, specifically the oceans, than Congresswoman Bonamici.
Well, thank you so much, Sean, and thank you to Seek. Happy Earth Day, everyone. Really appreciate the opportunity to come together. Sean mentioned that the first Earth Day was on 1970. Well, the first time climate change was brought up in the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, on which I served, was in 1988. I wasn't on the committee then, but Jim Hansen, former NASA astronaut, came into the Science, Space, and Technology Committee here in the House and predicted accelerated climate change, and he advocated for strict emissions reductions. Imagine if his words were taken seriously back then in 1988, where we'd be today. I want to start with a personal story. My grandfather was an immigrant. He was also a coal miner. And he worked in the coal mine until he lost his leg, and then he died of lung disease. And so since I was a child, knowing what my grandfather's life was like, why would we want to bring back coal? It baffles me that this administration does not understand the harms that come from fossil fuels. So I'm here to talk about the ocean, which of course covers more than 70% of the planet. If the ocean isn't healthy, the planet's not healthy. You probably saw the Artemis II astronauts looking down at Earth and what a perspective that is, the blue and the green. And the ocean can be an economic engine, a national security asset. It's a really critical food source, and it's a climate regulator. But when it is not healthy, we have ocean acidification, when we have harmful algal blooms, that puts our planet at risk. And I tell you, this administration is putting it on life support. Since January of last year, America's key ocean and climate agency has been under attack. This administration's first proposal was to eliminate NOAA. Fortunately, that didn't happen, but how insane to eliminate NOAA. They tried to cut the staffing, the research capacity, weather and ocean data, which is so critical. NOAA, which is really important to Oregon, I just have to give a shout out to two NOAA administrators from Oregon. I've had the honor to work with Dr. Jane Lubchenco and Dr. Richard Spinrad, both from Oregon State University. NOAA does so much important work, data, their forecasting capabilities. That's really critical for early warnings, for risk modeling, for disaster preparedness. There's more than 550 National Weather Service staff who were forced out. Remember DOGE? That was just between January and April. And these decisions really did threaten our ports, our supply chains that are already vulnerable to extreme weather disruptions. They also eliminated NOAA's billion-dollar disaster database. Talk about climate hushing. That is the tool that tracked more than 400 major disasters since 1980, and that tracking really helps. They're trying to conceal climate disasters, and those climate disasters cause us an average of $150 billion annually. They're trying to ignore it. They're trying to hide it. And, as Senator Markey was talking about, lives lost. Despite the stakes that we face as a nation and a planet, the Trump administration is still trying to shutter and close down the Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research and the National Science Foundation's National Center for Atmospheric Research. They think it doesn't matter. But this is not government efficiency, it's censorship. And when they censor the science, it betrays the public's right to know the risks of extreme weather, of air pollution, of ocean warming, because they're doing it because they care about fossil fuel and polluters because they're making billions of dollars off of this deregulation as costs continue to increase. They make more money. So last year, the Republicans greenlit more than 35 new offshore oil and gas sale leases off the Gulf, the Alaskan coast, and they're trying to add California and the Pacific Northwest, and we say no way. We're not having offshore drilling off our coast. The Trump administration is also merging the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management and the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement. These were intentionally split after the disastrous Deepwater Horizon. They're trying to bring them back together. They need to be split. They're also rushing permits for deep sea mining. There's a lot of risks to deep sea mining. They're trying to rush permitting for deep sea mining, drilling and extraction. That's a direct risk to the ocean, to fisheries, to tourism, to coastal infrastructure that depend on, as our coastal communities do, a healthy marine ecosystem. So as they undermine and ignore climate science, their deregulatory agenda, they're cutting checks to corporations to purge biodiversity, to ravage pristine waters, and to strain already unaffordable energy bills. It's greed over governance. But we were asked to provide some hope, right? So Congress has largely rejected a lot of the short-sighted cuts to NOAA and to NSF. That happened in the last appropriation cycle. We are fighting to make sure that happens again. We had the courts recently reinstate FEMA's BRIC grant program. Those are infrastructure grants for resilience that they tried to eliminate. The Weather Service is working to rehire staff. Now, that's not going to solve the harm already done. So we're going to work so hard not only on this Earth Day, but going forward, to do the work we need to do to be committed to our whole planet and to treat resilience as a priority and climate science as a roadmap that informs smarter economic decisions that really do create a better future for this generation, the next, and the next. So I'm really honored to work with SEEK, leading this effort for a healthy ocean and a healthy planet. So thank you, everybody, for being here today. I expect somebody has a question for me.
I do have a question, Congresswoman Bonamici. Can I just ask the staffing cuts to NOAA in particular, like how have you seen that lead to increased cost?
Sure. NOAA does really critical work, and when they their staff is cut, they can't do all the work they need to do. So the ocean and health and climate data is really critical because it helps decision making, not just in coastal communities, but across the country. This is a public good. I don't know if you know this, but there was no confirmed NOAA administrator during the entire first Trump administration because Trump wanted to put in an administrator who wanted to privatize the entire Weather Service, and we fought back on that. But the cuts across the agency, and it's particularly at the Weather Service cuts, when we reduce forecasting and early warnings, that is really tough. It increases costs when disasters hit. There's less precise data, whether it be about droughts or storms, heats and floods, and that drives up costs for farmers. Insurers, we had a lot of conversations with Representative Castor about that and the cost of insurance going up. Utilities that need to plan ahead. So agriculture needs, as you know, the outlooks for their crop yields. When I talk to farmers, they say we don't look at the weather every day, we look at it every hour. And if it's not there, if it's not accurate, that affects their water management and their forecasting errors that could really cause crop loss. So it's really critical that we protect NOAA and have full staffing. As disasters cost more, insurance premiums rise, and families will pay the price. And our farmers will be hurt. So thank you.
So I understand you have to go. So we're going to turn over to Congresswoman Grijalva next. If you've not watched Congresswoman Grijalva's speech on her first moments in Congress, I would encourage you all to go watch it. It is, when people get sworn in, you get a few minutes on the floor. You can say anything you want. It's usually some variant of your campaign speech. You brought this righteous voice of speaking truth to power, speaking truth in front of pretenders to power. And standing up for the Epstein survivors, which you were, of course, held out as. That was not a surprise to any of us who knew your father and his lifetime commitment to justice for the least among us. And speak some truth to us about environmental justice, if you would.
Well, good morning. Buenos dias. Thank you all for being here today. You know, leaders, organizers, advocates who are not just talking about environmental justice, but living and fighting for it every single day. I'm proud to represent Arizona's 7th Congressional District, where environmental justice is not just theoretical, it's something people experience in their everyday lives. I grew up on a Superfund site where drinking water was contaminated by THC, and cancer clusters affect families to this day. It affected me personally. I have my nana, my dad, my tia, all died of very aggressive cancers. And I believe very strongly, while there's nobody wants to do like a comprehensive analysis of what is going on with people right now, because that means someone would actually have to be held accountable. The aggressive nature of cancers in that community is stark. When you have a mile radius and there are 3 young men under the age of 20 that have testicular cancer, that is not normal. And that's the kind of stuff we have. People that have rare cancers of lymph nodes, different bones. And when you look at the neighborhood, that's common in the neighborhood. So everyone's like, well, that's just the neighborhood you live in. Like, let's acknowledge the fact that that's because people were drinking contaminated water for decades. And so in southern Arizona, we're on the front lines of another huge issue, which is extreme heat. Farm workers, construction workers, outdoor laborers are working longer, more dangerous days, risking their health just to make a living. It is common in June and July to have, and Representative Ansari knows this, 117 degrees, 120 degrees is pretty normal in July. And people still work every day. And so communities along our border are facing even worsening air quality, water scarcity, the long-term impacts of extractive industries that have left contamination behind and don't clean up. So as for Indigenous communities in my district, environmental justice is inseparable from protection of sacred land, including places like Oak Flat, where culture, identity, and environmental stewardship are deeply connected. These are not isolated challenges. They are the result of policy choices that far too long have prioritized corporate profits over people and shut down communities out of decision-making and impacting our lives. And today I want to provide a brief update on what we're seeing at the federal level. This Earth Day, which should be a celebration, the Bicameral Environmental Justice Caucus that I co-founded released a report card laying out the 100 ways that this Trump administration is actively making our communities and our environment sicker. This is not abstract. This is happening right now. We are seeing environmental protections rolled back. We are seeing polluters given the green light while communities are left to deal with the consequences. And we're seeing environmental justice itself being dismantled. As highlighted in the report card, the administration has shut down all environmental justice offices at the EPA, rescinded 781 environmental justice grants that were meant to support frontline communities. They have also rolled back protections against toxin pollutants, eliminated programs that help families access clean energy, and weakened standards to help keep our air and water safe. We literally had a vote on the Shower Act on the floor. The Shower Act, I wish it was deeper than just what I'm going to say, literally just took protections away from making sure that people don't take showers with 7 shower heads, like waste all of this water. That was the Shower Act. We voted on it. 2 weeks later, we voted on rolling back energy savings on our appliances. So this is what this administration is concerned about while we care about what's happening in our communities. They fired thousands of public health and environmental experts, censored climate science, and gutted the very agencies tasked with protecting our communities. And at the same time, they are fast-tracking polluting projects and fast-tracking mining, including one in my district, while eliminating public input and shutting down communities out of the process. So when we talk about environmental justice, we're not just talking about the past. We're talking about an active, ongoing rollback of protections happening in real time. Environmental justice is a public health crisis, full stop. It is an affordability crisis. It is a moral failure. And because when a family can't drink their water, when a worker can't safely do their job, when a community is forced to breathe polluted air, that is not just an environmental issue. That is a failure in leadership. But what gives me hope and what brings us here today is that communities have never stopped organizing. They have never stopped leading. And that's what environmental justice has always been about. Centering frontline communities in policymaking, holding agencies and corporations accountable, and pushing for solutions that actually reflect what people are experiencing on the ground. Because we cannot afford any more half measures or policies that look good on paper but fail in practice. Thank you for having me here. Happy Earth Day. I'm very excited to be on the front line trying to protect our environment every single day.
So can you just, as an Illinoisan, you can never go wrong quoting Abraham Lincoln. But Lincoln said the purpose of government is to do for the people what they can't rightfully do for themselves. Yeah. And everything you're talking about, taking that away, talk about the whiplash. How are the advocates for these communities, where are those folks finding hope right now with this White House?
The whiplash is real. Under the Biden administration, we had some gains. And a lot of those were executive order, so they have to be codified into law. One of them that we worked on, key legislation that my dad and Congressman Donald McEachin championed, like centering frontline communities and decision-making, is important. But what we're seeing is how quickly it can be undone when it is not codified. So our environmental protections have to be codified into law. That is the charge that we have to take on right away when we get the gavel. Because we can't continue to hope and pray that things are going to get better. We have to make sure it does. And advocates are frustrated. What I'm hearing more than anything else, though, is determination. They are mad, and they're going to hold this administration accountable. They're going to hold us accountable for protecting them. And we'll need to strengthen legislation that reflect the scale of what we're seeing right now. And one of the things that we can take away from this experience is a learning one, like the light bulb went off. And that when we say, well, we've never had an executive do X, Y, or Z, we can't count on that anymore. We have to make sure that we protect people with laws and not just executive orders, because we have a lot of work to do to protect our environment.
On the subject of people who are wondering if the United States is who it thought it was, let's now turn to every other country in the world and have no better person to lead that than Congresswoman Ansari, who, of course, represented the United States before the United Nations on climate change issues before coming to Congress. Talk to us about the international community and our relations there.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much to Seek for organizing this. It's great to be here among people who still use the word climate change. I feel like I just don't even hear climate change or the climate crisis mentioned nearly enough, even though not only has the issue not gone away, we are very much rapidly getting to a tipping point in our ability to manage the climate crisis. So there's no doubt it is a dark moment in American history, not only because of the corruption, the cruelty, and the authoritarianism by Donald Trump and his administration, but because we are reaching that tipping point in our ability to manage climate change. And I have proudly spent my entire career working on this issue. I began my career at 22 working on the UN Secretary General's climate change team. It was Ban Ki-moon at the time. And I got to see the behind the scenes of what it took to make the Paris Climate Accord a reality. Decades of negotiations between nearly every country in the world, and then a lot of the, behind the scenes of President Obama working with China and putting together a joint statement that really paved the way to that becoming a reality. And it was when Donald Trump took us out of the Paris Climate Agreement for the first time that I realized that we were in an existential moment without the United States at the helm of global leadership, and that would put even more pressure on local government, on state government, on corporations. And so I want to talk a little bit about the impacts of what it means for the United States to have pulled out of Paris for a second time now. Because this time, you can say the first time, I think with many things that Trump did, you can say, oh, this was a mistake, this won't happen again, Americans won't do this again. And I think the betrayal to the international community and our partners on the global stage and every other country in the world that this has now happened again is a betrayal that will be very difficult for us to come back from. And the work that we will have to do to demonstrate that the United States is serious about climate change in a post-Trump world will be very difficult. Without U.S. leadership on climate, an even greater burden is placed on everybody else, and especially on developing nations who have contributed the least to climate change but are feeling the disproportionate effects. So look at a country like Chad, whose largely rural population has been affected by recurring drought and floods. The Maldives will be 80% uninhabitable by 2050 and completely underwater by 2100. Afghanistan, which relies on access to water from glaciers for hydropower, human consumption, and agriculture. And then rich industrialized countries like the United States, who have been the leading drivers of the climate crisis, who need to be investing the most to combat it. But under Republican leadership, we've seen exactly the opposite of that. And unfortunately, this time around, not only have we pulled out of the agreement, but we've seen the impacts domestically. Obviously, the Trump administration has completely backtracked on the historic climate investments through the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act. And that is now impacting our local government's ability to follow through with very ambitious commitments that they have made. So there are a lot of trickle effects that go about there. And we know that's because the fossil fuel industry gave Donald Trump over $1 billion, and he in front of the American people, promised them giveaways, and that's exactly what's been happening. Then I also want to talk about, the fact that it's not just Paris that Donald Trump has taken the United States out of. In particular, USAID was gutted, and that affects climate work as well. Work has seized on projects to develop climate resilience and disaster preparedness, promote the transition to clean energy, and build more resilient agricultural systems, all of which will ultimately have the impact of increasing emissions as well as the global migration crisis. He's also pulled out of the overall United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, as well as the Green Climate Fund, which is the climate finance mechanism that the United States already was failing to meet our obligations under, and that's always been one of the biggest challenges as it pertains to developing countries because they need finance to be able to meet the commitments of Paris the same way our countries can. So many, many challenges. We know the irreversible harm that will take place. I think right now it is really important and up to us as members of Congress to show that the United States is still in this fight. I will say I have been disappointed to see a little bit of a difference in response from the private sector during the second Trump administration and how the response has been. After the first time Donald Trump pulled out of the agreement, you had a massive "we are still in" movement. Companies, openly and proudly saying they will still meet their commitments to Paris, that they will still, if you were a car company, they would say we're still on track for electrification. And we've seen that dissipate a little bit. I think there's been more fear this time of a very vengeful Trump administration. But I'm hopeful in the colleagues that we have here on the Democratic side. I'm hopeful that when we take back the majority, we will be aggressive in passing legislation that will bring us back on track. And then I think we need to work, on overdrive to make sure that the next president of the United States is somebody who will not, next time rejoining Paris won't be enough. That is that's the bare minimum that the United States will have to do. I think we're going to have to be very creative and ambitious with partnerships that we can develop internationally on climate security, on capacity building, and on climate finance to make sure that we can elevate and meet the demands of what will be, a world which we will have already accelerated the climate catastrophes that are taking place. So we have a lot of work to do. I still remain hopeful. If I wasn't hopeful, I wouldn't be here. So I'm very confident that we can build a coalition to get us there. Thank you.
Congresswoman Ansari, especially with your United Nations background, we've seen this administration, alienate our partners and allies all over the world and see our climate actions. What can we do as elected officials to speak out to the world to let them know that we should not be defined by what Donald Trump's administration is doing?
Yeah, I mean, it was very unfortunate that we weren't able to go to COP this last year, given I think it was a shutdown that was happening. But I think that we need to be as visible as possible in spaces where our international partners are at. So whether that be the annual climate conference, but there are other forums as well that take place. And I think having as many members of Congress and senators and just Americans in general, CEOs of companies, should still be going to these events. I also think that we could probably do more on speaking on international media. I know, I get requests often from media in the United Kingdom, for example, and most recently, in Southeast Asia and others. And I often say no because there's already so much demands on time, but I've been thinking more about it. And I think that if we want to get our message out in the world and say that we are still committed to climate policy and even showcase work that's happening locally, then I think those of us, with the ability to have that kind of microphone should probably put a little bit more time into speaking to those outlets so that we make sure that people, not just the governments, but the people hear us as well.
So I was elected in 2018 after a career in the clean energy industry and served 2 terms on the Climate Committee and dedicated my legislative agenda to climate change, which I mention only to say that I have a very soft spot in my heart for people who were elected in 2018 and worked in the clean energy industry and served on the Climate Committee for 2 terms and have dedicated their legislative efforts to climate change, which is why I'm so pleased now to turn it over to my friend and partner, Congressman Levin from California.
Thank you so much, Thank you. Thank you. That's why David gets the big bucks. Thank you, David. What Sean didn't mention is that when he and I first ran as people with experience in the clean energy industry, we were both told not to run with clean energy as our lead agenda item. And I think we did a great job on those select committees under the leadership of Chair Castor in showing up and in making sure the international community knew that we were still in. And we'll get back there. We'll get back there one of these days. I wanted to speak just a few minutes on this Earth Day about something that is very near and dear to you and me both, Sean, and that's the Energy Bills Relief Act. That is a comprehensive bill that we now have roughly 130 co-sponsors for in the House. It's been a great undertaking, working with so many people, so many stakeholders to try to figure out that consensus-based, common sense policy that will actually lower people's electric bills. And I wanted to begin by talking about the energy security aspect of this, which is often overlooked. Obviously, people are feeling it when they go to pay their electric bill every month. It's gone up roughly 13%, many parts of the country more, and Donald Trump ran on a premise that he was going to reduce everyone's electric bill. In fact, he said he was going to cut everyone's electric bill in half if he was elected, and instead those bills have gone up. But what's also happened is that, as we have seen with the war in Iran, fossil fuels are volatile. That volatility is baked in every time that you go and you pay that electric bill or you pay that gas bill. And the International Energy Agency has described this now as the largest disruption to global oil supply in history, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Unlike oil and gas, we know that the price of wind and solar is not subject to the whims of foreign conflicts, not subject to volatile global commodity markets. The wind and the sun did not have to traverse the Strait of Hormuz to power our homes. Every megawatt of clean energy we add to the grid is a direct investment in American energy independence, insulating families from exactly this kind of shock and reducing the leverage that foreign conflicts have over our economy. So, friends, at a time when electricity rates are soaring across the country, when millions of families are struggling to pay their rising energy bills, the access that we have to clean and affordable energy is more important than ever.
These hikes that I mentioned before, the 13% hikes in 2025 for electric bills, that hit more than 80 million electric customers and 28 million gas customers nationwide. Families need relief now. Everyone in Congress that speaks to their constituents knows that it's a huge problem. And the way to do it is to expand access to affordable, reliable, and clean energy through a consumer-first energy policy. Sean, that's why you and I introduced this bill, the Energy Bills Relief Act, a proactive agenda to lower electric bills for Americans, put consumers first, tackle energy costs in 3 key ways. First, deploy affordable clean energy. Second, put affordability over profits. And third, modernize our electric grid. It's a comprehensive bill that includes policies to lower energy costs, such as reinstating tax credits for home and system-wide energy improvements that were ended by President Trump and congressional Republicans, ensuring that facilities like data centers are paying for their fair share, incentivize utility companies to save consumers money, provide financial assistance to American families to make sure their power isn't shut off, and give a voice to the American people so they can benefit from the energy projects in their communities. We have a plan to fix this mess, and thanks to your leadership and thanks to all of our friends, we're going to get this done. And I yield back.
I have so many questions, but I understand you have to get to a vote, so thank you for that.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for all your partnership.
Thank you.
We are, I think we are probably all, the virtue of having members of Congress, all this wisdom is that we all run long. Let me now turn over to a good friend from Virginia who can represent any part of Virginia, including the part that he now represents, or soon will, leader on the Ways and Means Committee, who actually, fun fact, I don't know if widely known, got a master's degree that you studied for on the floor while we were voting last term.
Studying for it this morning in Ways and Means.
He's a smart dude. Don Beyer on
thank you very
endangered
much.
species.
And thank you for your wonderful leadership. I talk about you all the time in positive ways. There you go, sir. And happy Earth Day, everyone. I'm proud to be part of it. I want to thank Seek and Saad for organizing this event and say how much I appreciate everyone's attention on these urgent issues affecting our natural world. Over the course of the first year of the second Trump administration, they have not held back on their brazen contempt for science at the direction of industry stakeholders. The attacks by the Trump administration on our planet have been numerous, far-reaching, and devastating. We are currently in the midst of a biodiversity crisis, and I've been deeply concerned by the concerted effort of this administration to actually exacerbate the crisis. We as humans fundamentally need a healthy, biodiverse ecosystem for our own survival. But this administration has been focused on rolling back the red carpet for industry, regardless of impacts. I'm co-chair of the Congressional Endangered Species Caucus, which looks how better to protect species, and I've been laser focused on the administration's egregious attacks since day one. On that first day, he declared an emergency to expedite development of fossil fuel and mining projects, as well as water delivery projects, saying they didn't have to abide by the Endangered Species Act requirements. And then Interior Secretary Burgum reissued 4 proposed rules from the first Trump administration a week at the ESA. They would, number 1, make it easier to exclude critical habitats. Number 2, make it harder to protect threatened species. 3, eliminate the requirement that agencies try to mitigate their impacts on species. And 4, reframe considerations to incorporate economic impacts and accelerate the process to download species, basically picking profit over the survival of species. Luckily, many of these are being challenged. Some pieces have been stopped entirely in court, but those rules apparently weren't enough. So Burgum added another rule to rescind the regulatory definition of harm within the ESA, making it easier to directly kill or injure wildlife. And these sweeping attacks were not the only efforts to undermine wildlife. The administration dropped the Wolf Recovery Plan, which would put gray wolves on a healthy path to recovery and move to permanently drop protections nationwide. I know many of you here care deeply about our charismatic species, but we had made wolves extinct in the lower 48 in the last century. And they're on their way back, but they're doing everything they can to stop that. And not just the grizzly wolf. The gray wolf. This administration is also working to delist the grizzly bear. And they're not letting science make the determination of what the ESA requires. Secretary Burgum also rolled back habitat protection rules in national forests with the rescission of the roadless rule. He undermined the important wildlife habitat by reopening the coastal plain of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge for oil and gas drilling, reversing protections put in place by other administrations. And just last month, a rarely used endangered species committee was commonly called the God Squad. And they met in secret. They wouldn't let us in. They voted to exempt oil and gas operations in the Gulf. And they specifically did it because of the war of choice in Iran. So it doesn't have to do Endangered Species Act in the Gulf anymore. And all this was done in the name of national security. But this action does not affect any immediate gas price sensitivity the administration is trying to fend off. It's not going to. It'll be years before these things have impact on gas prices. But what it does do instead is risk the extinction of the Rice's whale. And on birds specifically, Trump signed an executive order that weakened protections provided the Migratory Bird Treaty Act by no longer prohibiting incidental takes. In our waters, the NOAA administrator proposed increasing federal vessel speed limits, which are going to increase the collisions which actually kill endangered whales. Our work in Congress is more important than ever, and I'm alarmed that we have to fend off constant legislation and ruinous impacts to wildlife and their habitats from this administration and our Republican colleagues. We should be fixing the biodiversity crisis, not making it worse. With folks like Sean, we're working tirelessly on legislation to protect our planet's wildlife and their habitat. Let me give you a few examples. We have the Wildlife Road Crossings Program Reauthorization Act, which reauthorizes a popular program within the Department of Transportation to invest in wildlife crossings where human infrastructure meets migration corridors. We have the Wildlife Corridors and Habitat Connectivity Conservation Act. We just reintroduced it today in a bipartisan way, which would provide a thoughtful, comprehensive framework to support natural migration patterns, bolster native biodiversity, and ensure ecosystem resiliency nationwide. Toward the end of his life, I got to meet E.O. Wilson, the famous E.O. Wilson, a winner of 2 Pulitzer Prizes. At the end of his life, what he cared about more than anything else was corridors for biodiversity. The Wildlife Corridors and USDA Conservation Programs Act, which would establish American wildlife corridors mapping, designation, and conservation within the USDA's jurisdiction. And then the Appalachian Trail Centennial Act. We had the 100th anniversary of the Appalachian Trail last year, and that would enhance the preservation, maintenance, and management of the Appalachian Trail, which is, in fact, the ultimate wildlife corridor in the United States. And finally, we're working on legislation to reverse that recent God Squad decision that I mentioned. As stewards of our planet, it's our duty to preserve biodiversity for future generations. I think all of us know the number of terrestrial animals has fallen in half since the mid-1970s. It's moving in the wrong direction. And this work doesn't just happen on Earth Day. Earth Day allows us to celebrate this great work 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I look forward to hearing more about my colleagues' work and their good.
Thank you, Don. And I'm really glad to hear that you're making it bipartisan. These things shouldn't be partisan. Unfortunately, they are, but I'm glad to hear that we're able to.
We continue to work on the floor to get more Republicans to support this. So. And in fact, the Endangered Species Act was a very bipartisan act to begin with. Overwhelming support. Yeah,
we can do it. So I just want to conclude this. James Madison, Virginia?
Yes. President, too.
When they were debating what became the Constitution, said that because we cannot rely on the virtue of those who lead us, we have to depend on the virtue of those who select them. We are all in this together. There's a handful of us who have the good fortune to be in the positions we're in. I hope you've got a sense from hearing from the folks around this table that when we do depend on the virtue of those who select us and have a free and fair democracy, you elect some people who take this job seriously and who are committing themselves not to going viral on the internet, not to doing whatever other silliness gets done around here, but leaving this campsite that we call Earth a little better than we found it. So thank you to Don. Thanks to all who were here. And that's maybe, I'm going to turn over now to the next panel, which is really going to focus on the more virtuous multitude, and specifically the voices of the advocates who are working to make sure that hold ourselves accountable and keep pushing and elevating these issues. So we'll take a brief pause while we reset the table. Thanks to all who came. Thank you, and stay hopeful.
just got pulled.
Nice work.
I know.
Do you know why?
Yes, because of all the things we did.
Sorry.
I know.
Bravo.
I know. I know. Yeah. I mean, that's what we do. Well, that's.
Hello, hello. Hi, everybody. We will now start the second portion of our event today. Thank you all for joining us today for Federal Fire Local Heat. We wanted to bring a bit of drama and pizzazz to Earth Day while also acknowledging everything happening in the world. And when I was drafting my remarks for this session, I was getting constant notifications about bombs being dropped all across the Middle East, and it felt remiss to not acknowledge the reality that all of these wars that are happening across the world are directly linked to fossil fuels. All of this conquest that we see, all of these energy prices that we see increasing, all of the burdens that our communities are bearing all across the world, communities that look like me, are experiencing these disastrous consequences from a system that is built on fossil fuels, and that is not just built on fossil fuels, but stubbornly petulant and pushing even further to demand reliance on fossil fuels. They have turned the forest into a fire, the ocean into a dumpster, and the sky into a sewer, and just discarding and throwing away our beautiful natural resources and planet. And then they delay and deny and then deny and delay and then repeal and repeal and repeal to the point where I'm so sick of saying that we need climate action now. And I know that for so many of the people in this room who've been leading this fight for decades, it is exhausting to be saying the same thing again and again to seemingly deaf, blank, uninterested administrations who continue to deny the reality of the world that we're facing in, and that they actively know at this point that they're making worse. We are right now in the biggest deregulatory moment in U.S. history, and the crazy thing about that statement is you would think to say that we're in the biggest moment of deregulatory history would be an attack and like, oh, that's a bad thing. But if you go to the EPA's website, that's literally their headline on what Lee Zeldin's agenda is for the EPA. And what we've seen is rollbacks to communities across the country, clawbacks of funding that environmental justice communities desperately need. We've seen rollbacks to the endangerment finding. We see attacks on regulations for mercury pollution. I don't know who's trying to admit mercury into the air, but I guess that's something that we're suddenly interested in doing. And giving away billions of dollars to foreign governments to continue developing fossil fuels. There's no logic to it, and there's no interest in the American people or for our planet at large. And you know, in my work with the UN, I can tell you, to Congresswoman Ansari's point, is a lot of the rest of the world is moving on. You know, America was so much a leader on climate policy for years, but yet now the rest of the world is moving on because we have gone so far back. And it's a moment like that that made me reflect on this Earth Day to what is it that we can actually do? How is it that we can actually move forward? And that was the precipice of organizing this event today, Federal Fire Local Heat, and bringing together this Earth Day emergency strategy session where we had incredible senators, congresspeople, and leaders who are all across the country, whether it's with big federal organizations, grassroots mobilizations, or even their own activist power, demanding and fighting for change in their communities. And it's a moment like this where, you know, Earth Day started over 50 years ago, and if we had listened then, things would have been different. But we know that by the year 2030, we need to cut our emissions in half. That's in literally like tomorrow, and we look at the midterm elections this year bringing us to 2026, the next presidential election in 2028 bringing us into 2029. The timeline is getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and the disastrous consequences across the world are getting worse and worse. And so I was so honored that we were able to work in collaboration with SEEK, the Sustainable Energy and Environment Coalition, members of Congress, and with all these incredible grassroots leaders to really push this conversation forward. What is it that we can actually do in this moment? Where have we gone wrong? Where do we need to go forward? And what is the future going to look like as we push for hope and for change for generations of tomorrow? So I'm so honored that you all took the time to come out here today as we talk about issues from national parks to the endangerment finding to climate justice and public health. So our first speaker of today is Tiernan Sittenfield. She's the Executive Director of the National Parks Conservation Association. Please.
Thank you so much, Saad. Thank you to SEEK. Thank you to all of the members of Congress for their incredible leadership, the many who spoke today, and all of those who are fighting for clean air, clean water, protecting parks and public lands every single day. This Earth Day, it is fair to say that our national parks are more important, more needed, and more threatened than ever before. It is always worth celebrating and important to celebrate our parks, but truly the threats are massive. Just in the last 15 months alone, the National Park Service has lost a quarter of its staff. That's about 4,000 jobs. These are dedicated public servants. This is knowledge, this is expertise, this is experience, and this is completely unacceptable. This is also affecting the visitor experience at our national parks, which of course we all treasure every single day, whether it's closed facilities, whether it's longer lines, whether it's fewer ranger programs. But the harm actually runs much deeper. There are experts who are being pulled away, biologists, historians, who instead of monitoring our air and our water, tracking endangered species, doing important scientific research, are having to clean bathrooms or to staff visitor centers because there simply aren't enough people left to get all of this work done. So, as if this weren't bad enough, just a couple of weeks ago, the administration proposed a budget that would slash park operations by 25%. That could have catastrophic impacts, including losing another quarter of the workforce at National Park Service operations. So this really is, these are people, these are experiences. That's why NPCA is fighting so hard to ensure that this budget proposal doesn't go anywhere and that instead Congress pass a budget that is worthy of our parks. So there's the funding and the staffing challenges and threats, which are massive. But at the same time, every day we are fighting. We're fighting to protect the sacred lands around Chaco Culture National Historical Park in New Mexico from being reopened to oil and gas development. We're fighting to stop bulldozers for an industrial mining company from ripping through Mojave National Preserve. We're working to ensure that Ambler Road in Alaska is never built so that we can protect beautiful, incredible acres of national park lands in Alaska and lands that are sacred to Native Alaskan communities. And of course, we are very proud to be working with so many of you to ensure that our national parks are able to continue to tell the full truth and the full history, to discuss facts, science, climate, even when it is painful to do so. So it is true, as many people say, I think Wallace Stegner may have first said it, our national parks are America's best idea. They also are incredible investments. Every dollar that we invest in our national parks returns $15 to our national economy. In this year, as we approach our 250th birthday, our parks truly can bring us together across differences. So we applaud all of the congressional champions, all of our partners. Thank you again to USAID for bringing us together. Thank you to SEEK. And we call on every single member of Congress to work together to protect our parks for now and for future generations.
Thank you. I know we all treasure national parks, and to me, they're one of the most nonpartisan parts of the environmental movement. People, Republicans, Democrats, can generally appreciate our national parks. What's one thing you would love to see happen right now in terms of policy for our national parks?
Where do I start? We would love for Congress to pass, and in a bit of good news, again, it's Earth Day, so we want to celebrate. One thing I will say is that we are very proud to have played a role in stopping what would have been the largest data center in the country from being built literally right at the doorstep of Manassas National Battlefield. So people are coming together across differences and standing up for all kinds of parks. So we would like to see more wins like that. And as I said, we would very much like to see Congress continue to stand strong. They did reject the majority of the president's budget proposal last year when it came to our parks, but we really do need to ensure that Congress once again reject the harmful proposal and pass a budget that is worthy of our parks.
Thank you. Let's do it. Up next is an organization that has been leading action on climate developing campaigns across the country. I've had the privilege of working with them. Here is the campaign director of Climate Action Campaign, Margie Alt.
Thank you, Saad. Thanks to Saad and to the SEEK crew for bringing us together, and it was fun listening to some of the biggest champions we have in Congress. It is still a good time to act on climate now.
Always. Yes.
Every day is. But, you got to fix. Thank you. And climate should be a very bipartisan issue because it affects everybody. But things have changed since the first Earth Day. So the Climate Action Campaign is a coalition. We have major national environmental justice, public health groups, represent about 15 million people. And we have one mission, which is to get durable, equitable climate policy passed at the federal level. Not an easy feat in this moment in time. But the truth of the matter is, 50 some odd years ago on the first Earth Day, that built enough power to get the EPA set up, which then got clean air and clean water for our families and the communities that we care so much about. And we have to go back to that kind of political power. Obviously, right now, the Trump administration is tearing it all down. Their policies are literally killing people. Two that I want to point out as the most terrible amongst the most terrible, and you can pick your favorite, but one is that they literally now value human lives at zero when they assess the cost and benefit of setting up a new policy. They are using the power of the federal government to give companies that pollute more profits rather than protecting the public. The second of the most outrageous policies, from a choice of many, is the rollback of the endangerment policy. They have fundamentally taken the program that required the EPA to regulate carbon pollution because of its impact on our health and the environment, and they have rolled it back. They have single-handedly made climate denial the national policy of the United States of America. This is shameful. CAC, our partners, so many of your groups around the country are working. We're in the courts, we're in Congress, we're in state capitals, we are in the media, and we are talking to the public every single day to remind people that we are not expendable. We matter here. We have to do more, though. We have got to rebuild that power that we saw coming out of that first Earth Day. We need enough people power to overcome the fossil fuel interests and to rebuild the EPA and the rest of the federal government back to being protectors of our environment and of our families. With the extreme weather that is going on and continuing to increase because of climate pollution, so many lives are affected. So many costs are being levied on Americans. At the same time, clean energy is the fastest and cheapest way to get energy onto the grid. And adding to the good news, this is my only good news piece, 70% of Americans believe climate change is happening and know that we need to do something about it. So we have all of these reasons that people should come back together. But the truth is we're facing some headwinds too, because way too many of the consulting class and pundits tell us not to talk about climate. They tell us people only care about affordability right now, and that is what we should talk about. Well, I am here to tell you that if we do not talk about climate, we will not solve the climate crisis. Let me close with this. The climate hushing has to stop, and not just to celebrate Earth Day, but every single day until we solve the crisis. The science is clear. People are experiencing the costs of climate change themselves. Their kids are getting sicker. Often schools or camps are closed because it's too hot out. Their bills are going up because it's so cold in the winter and so hot in the summer. Insurance is very hard to get in places that have been hit by extreme weather, and so much more. It's our job to help people connect the dots between the climate pollution and the extreme weather and the costs they're facing and the huge opportunities of a clean energy economy. So despite all the challenges, I still believe America has the potential to be a great country, and we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can limit climate pollution, and we can help people pay for their daily needs, and we do not have to choose between those two things. I'm really excited to be at the climate campaign, to be working with so many of you, to be here today in a room that was earlier filled with so many champs on the Hill. We have to stop the hushing and start the organizing that it will take to have the people power we need, get more champs like we heard earlier today, and take a bite out of the climate crisis as quickly as possible. Our lives depend on doing just that. Brighter days are coming. Happy Earth Day.
And I know a bunch of you all also had like cross questions that you wanted to ask each other, so please feel free to jump in at any moment. Thank you for those powerful words and for all the work that you do on climate. Another amazing climate organization, we have our Senior Advisor for Climate Urgency at Climate Power, Mia Logan.
Thank you so much, Saad, and thank you to Seek and everybody that came out today to celebrate Earth Day and to also come together and do exactly what Margie was just saying, which is walk and chew gum and make sure that we are considering how climate change is driving some of these cost impacts and affordability issues that we're seeing, but also how it is impacting quality of life issues, because I think that is something that is really important that we don't talk about all that often. And I want to spend some time today talking about it in the context of climate disasters. We know that 2026 is shaping up to bring overlapping and really high costs. We're talking billion-dollar disasters across most of the country. We've seen unprecedented winter low snowpack, which is going to increase drought across the western U.S. We've also seen an early spring heat wave. For those of us that are in D.C., that are spend all of our time, it was really hot earlier this month. Now it's cold. But if you're out west, people are already having their first 100 days of the year. And that's only going to exacerbate wildfire season and potentially make it even more hyperactive than usual. We also know that severe storm season is underway, and it's going to last into early summer, and we're going to expect stronger wind and larger hail than usual, which means that people's homes and properties are going to experience more damage than they usually do. And this is all happening right as Tornado Alley is expanding, not just in the Midwest and central U.S., but also now to the southeast. Hurricane season is going to probably yield more devastating Category 5 and Category 4 and 5 storms. And we are already seeing early indications that there's going to be a super El Nino this year that's probably going to hit around the fall and early winter. So just as hurricane season is starting to wrap up, we didn't have to deal with more extreme weather. And the reason all of this is important is because as Americans are facing this increasingly severe weather, the Trump administration is hollowing our ability to prepare for and respond to disasters. We see that he is gutting the National Weather Service and NOAA. We've heard about that even just today. And that's going to undermine our ability to forecast for major storms, forecast things like flooding, hurricane, and other storms. At the same time, we also see that his administration is gutting the the U.S. Forest Service, which means that we can't even mitigate and try and prevent wildfires from spreading and getting worse, as we've already seen wildfires get worse and increase in their damage in the last couple of years. When we have all this happening and we're gutting our ability to prepare for storms, it makes it even worse when we are also gutting and defunding opportunities to help people at the disaster. So when we see that the government is slashing funding for agencies like FEMA, and they're halting grants, and they're bottlenecking aid, and they're politicizing aid based on, kind of this like petty political infighting, it only means that American taxpayers are going to suffer more. And these cuts, along with the leadership failures that we are seeing, are just creating a situation where more American communities are being left to kind of fend for themselves. You're putting more people in danger, but also American taxpayers are the ones shouldering the bill for this, because when we gut our federal disaster preparedness and emergency response infrastructure, it's state and local governments that have to make up the difference. When we're talking about these cuts at the state and local level, and I say that it means that American taxpayers are going to be footing the bill, this is happening as Americans are already facing an affordability crisis, as we've heard people talk about ad nauseum. But what a lot of people are not saying is this affordability crisis, a lot of it is also climate change driven, right? When we're talking about higher energy costs, higher utility costs, and higher housing costs, that is because of climate change. One example of this is how extreme weather is driving up the insurance crisis. It's specifically making it harder for people to afford their average insurance premiums, and in a lot of cases, lose coverage altogether. We've seen over 1.4 million policies be canceled nationwide because of climate change, and insurance companies themselves are citing extreme weather as a reason for them to either raise rates or reduce coverage for millions of families. This isn't something that people are thinking about in the abstract. This is a major pain point for most Americans, and honestly for Americans regardless of where they fall on the political spectrum. We heard earlier today that 48% of homeowners in Florida say they believe climate change and extreme weather are the reasons why home insurance is becoming so unaffordable and inaccessible. But we also see in places like Texas, nearly 2/3 of homeowners cite climate change as a major cost concern, only second to healthcare. So this is higher than a lot of other more kitchen table issues that people are thinking about. And so as we look towards 2026 and even 2027, when we're going to see a higher number of billion-dollar disasters nationwide, where we're going to see more massive and probably deadly flooding, more extreme heat that's going to lead to health implications for different communities, more wildfires, more hailstorm, more damage, more devastation. We have to make sure that our government is preparing for what's ahead, and we have to hold accountable those that are trying to gut the things that we need, the services that we rely on to make sure that our communities can withstand these climate disasters and also recover from them. And it's just critically important on my end to make sure that we are doing our part as leaders in the climate advocacy space and also working with policymakers who agree with us on this issue to connect the dots between climate change, extreme weather, and driving rising costs for families. If we don't, what we'll see is more devastation, slower recovery times, and higher costs directly passed on to American families. Thank you.
Thank you, Mia. Really appreciate your insights and dot connecting work that you all do. It's very essential right now that people understand really what's happening with these systems, so thank you. Up next is someone who, if you don't know her, you need to know her. her work in organizing and her story and her activism is so inspiring, but also something that I hope everyone can understand, that climate change is happening to us all, and it's something that every time I hear you speak, I'm just like, so, yes.
I was like, who's next?
Up next is the incredible climate activist, storyteller, and someone who really drives me to work even harder, Naleli Kobo.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's truly an honor to be here with you all today on this Earth Day. I grew up in what is known as a sacrifice zone. I grew up 30 feet away from an active oil and gas well that severely impacted my health. From nosebleeds so severe I could no longer sleep in my own bed. I would have to sleep in a chair to prevent choking on my own blood at night. I had body spasms so severe where my mom would have to carry me from one place to the other. I had heart palpitations and I wore a heart monitor for several weeks. I developed asthma. That's something I'm always going to live with now. And at the age of 19, I heard the words nobody ever wants to hear. You have cancer. A month after I turned 19, I was diagnosed with stage 2 reproductive cancer. And ultimately, I was forced to choose between my life or my reproductive system. My activism was born at the age of 9, truly out of survival. And I fight each and every day, so my story ends with me. I began my activism with my mom, and we have worked tirelessly to shut down the wells in our community. We live in Los Angeles, which is the largest urban oil fields in the nation. Approximately 1 out of 3 Los Angeles residents lives a mile or less to an active oil and gas well. I'm very proud to say that after 16 years of our work, all 21 wells in my community are officially capped and sealed because of our dedicated efforts. Our city was voted unanimously in 2022 to ban all new oil and gas exploration and phase out the existing sites because of our work. And just recently, 2 years ago, we developed the largest health and safety buffer zone in the nation of 3,200 feet. And all of that happened because one community came together to say enough is enough. But I'm not just here to talk about our wins on paper, because this really is an opportunity to go deeper into the work that doesn't make it into the headlines. We need to talk about enforcement. A buffer zone really only works if we're watching the industry. We need community-led monitoring, so we aren't just taking these companies' words for it. We need to talk about remediation, making sure that these capped wells don't just sit there as toxic ghosts in our community, but the land is cleaned and can be cleaned and finally given back to our people, our communities. But most importantly, we need policy that addresses our health and safety. For those of us that have already been impacted, the damage is done. But we need a system that supports long-term health and safety of frontline families. We've proven that we can win this fight. Now I'm asking this team, these in the room and the media, yes, you, to help us finish the job and end sacrifice zones. We are the first generation to experience the effects of the climate crisis, but we're the last generation to be able to do anything about it. I know we always hear, what do you do when your community is under attack? You stand up and you fight back. So I'm going to ask you again. What do you do when your community is under attack?
Stand up, fight back.
What was that? You can't open your windows in your home. People are being diagnosed with cancer at an alarming rate. Your family is being poisoned because of your socioeconomic status and your zip code. So what do you do when your community is under attack?
Stand up, fight back.
I know you guys felt that one. We don't just need action. We need oversight. We need healing. And we need to make sure that these victories are permanent. Fear is temporary, but regret is forever. So now let's not let this time go by, but let's stand up and fight back to create the change we need. Thank you.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what we need more of. If you don't know Naleli, please follow her, find her online. She's incredible and will continue to inspire all of us, I'm sure. So thank you so much. On the note of environmental justice, we have an incredible organization and their leader who's been doing great work to really push for change in so many respects. So Dalal, the Managing Director for Programs and Policy at the Center for Earth, Energy and Democracy, also known as SEED. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you for this great panel, and thank you for all our champs who were here earlier today. It gives a lot of inspiration in these darker times that we find ourselves at. At SEED, we work to build power to really advance a just transition, one grounded in environmental justice, climate justice, and energy democracy. And that means ensuring that the communities most impacted by pollution and climate change are not just heard, but they are leading the solutions. At a national level, SEED convenes the Platform for a Just Climate, which is made up of 12 environmental justice organizations, 6 national environmental organizations, and over 300 co-signers to our mission. And we're all united in a shared vision, ending environmental racism and building a just climate. And that vision is deeply connected to why we're all here today. Earth Day has always been about people power. In 1970, 20 million people took to the streets to demand action. And that led to the creation of the EPA, the passage of the Clean Air Act, and other landmark protections. So today is not just a celebration, it's a reminder. We have won before, and we will win again. But to understand what we're fighting for, we also have to know what we're up against right now. And we know that from day one, the Trump administration has attacked environmental justice, values, policies, and investments. The Trump administration is not only ignoring decades of science, but also our most vulnerable communities, and they're throwing them under the bus. One of the examples that we heard earlier today was the rollback of the endangerment finding, which is a backbone of protections that limit pollution from power plants, highways, and oil and gas industry, and is especially crucial for Black, Brown, Indigenous, and low-income communities who are already breathing some of the dirtiest air in our country. We also heard about the recent release of the fiscal year 2027 presidential budget that has sweeping rollbacks on investments needed to protect public health and lower energy costs and support communities from frontline pollution that are dealing with climate change. And that brings us to a critical question. What does real climate progress look like in a hostile administration? For years, we've been told that market-based solutions and clean energy alone maybe could solve this crisis. But frontline communities have always known the truth. Clean energy does not automatically mean justice. Clean energy does not automatically mean improved health outcomes, economic relief, job opportunities at a community level. Justice has to be fought for, specifically, intentionally, and against the resistance of powerful interests who benefit from the status quo. For justice to prevail, our movement and institutions have to center the health and safety of the frontline communities and ensure clean air, clean water, access to the outdoors, and economic prosperity. That is why community-led solutions are so important. The people living on the front lines of pollution and climate chaos are not just direct witnesses to this crisis, they are the leaders with the knowledge on the solutions we need. Policies built in tandem with communities and decision makers, like the Donald McEachin Environmental Justice for All Act, show that what is possible when we center with community needs. All of our communities deserve to be protected, not treated as sacrifice zones. Environmental justice means that all people, regardless of race, income, or zip code, have a fundamental right to live in a healthy, safe, and prosperous community. So as we look ahead, the choice in front of us is clear. We can't go back because the status quo was never good enough for our communities. Instead, we must move forward toward a future that is not only cleaner, but fairer, not only more sustainable, but just. This Earth Day, I'm calling us to do two things: to fight back the rollbacks that are in front of us that harm our communities, but also to fight for a bold community-led solutions that will shape the communities that we all deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, and I feel like you two need to chat. There's something going on here with your work. And I think when we talk about environmental justice, we're often talking about people who don't, who feel they don't have a voice and don't have power. And I think another community that has no voice is animals, and we're seeing a record rate of animals go extinct. And I mean, I'll leave the information to you, Susan. I know you're the executive director of the Endangered Species Coalition, so please update us.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you to the members of Congress who were here earlier and my colleague organizations. As you said, yes, we are facing an extinction crisis, an existential crisis to the future of biodiversity on the planet. And I am so grateful, though, for the work that you all in this room and all of us are doing to stem that crisis, to help salmon, gray wolves, and the fragile survival of right whales in the Atlantic. Your leadership has really been making tangible difference for endangered wildlife. So 53 years ago, Congress came together in a powerful moment of unity to pass the Endangered Species Act with overwhelming bipartisan support. What followed is one of the greatest conservation success stories in the world. The ESA has helped pull iconic species like the bald eagle, the humpback whale from the brink of extinction. It has put species like the whooping crane, sea otter, and the Florida panther on the path to recovery. And today, despite the challenges that species face, 99% of species protected under the Endangered Species Act are still with us. This is not an accident. This is the result of a strong law, sound science, and sustained leadership. And just as importantly, and I love people have said people power, so I'm just going to say it again. It's about people power. It's the result of public support. At a time when our country feels deeply divided, the Endangered Species Act stands as a rare point of agreement, consistently supported by more than 80% of Americans across the political spectrum. And I have to say something interesting. Recent polls show that the number of support among conservatives is going up, despite what you might hear in the Beltway. So why is this moment so consequential? Because on Earth Day, this day to celebrate and protect the natural world, there is an effort underway to drastically weaken this law. 3 weeks ago, the Trump administration invoked the God Squad to exempt oil and gas drilling in the Gulf of Mexico from the Endangered Species Act, putting at risk the Rice's whale. There are only 51 Rice's whales left in the world. They only exist in the Gulf. It is America's whale. And yet they are moving forward with that. And Congressman Beyer went through a litany of really, truly egregious and draconian cuts and dissemblings of the Endangered Species Act. I won't touch on them, but suffice it to say, it's not good. However, today in Congress, and I was prepared to come and talk about a bill that was to receive a vote this afternoon, the Endangered Species Amendment Act. Like what the Trump administration is doing, this bill would have codified many of the worst elements of the Trump administration efforts to gut the Endangered Species Act, and it represents the most sweeping rollback of the Endangered Species Act in the history of the ESA, undermining every core protection, overriding science, pushing species closer to extinction. However, I am glad to say that because of people power, that vote didn't happen today. I'm so happy that I have something to celebrate today. So why did that happen? Well, the Endangered Species Act is not just helpful, it is indispensable. It is the roadmap and the safety net that makes species recovery possible. And we brought 55 people from around the country to Washington, D.C. this week. And this was not something that happened overnight. These people have been working, and we have all been working for years to tell the story of the success of the Endangered Species Act. But this week they were here. They happened to be here on the day that this vote was planned. And I want to tell you some of their stories about that people power and how they are working with communities and making change and changing hearts and minds. So they're connecting Americans to wildlife in their own backyards, but they're also transforming awareness into stewardship and stewardship into lasting political will for this special law. Take, for example, the story of the piping plover on Long Island in New York. There are fewer than 8,000 piping plovers left in the world. Roughly 300 nest on the beaches of Long Island. These tiny migratory birds, each weighing less than 4 quarters, face enormous odds, but they also have an extraordinary community behind them. Through the NYC Plover Project, this little bird's champions have built a powerful model of local engagement. They bring education into classrooms, they mobilize volunteers, easily recognized in their blue T-shirts, who spend their days on busy beaches, talking with visitors, protecting fragile nesting areas, and turning everyday beachgoers into advocates for endangered species. Up in Westchester, New York, the Wolf Conservation Center is not only helping to recover endangered Mexican and red wolves, they're also building a powerful connection between people and nature. In fact, the center has become the largest generator of tourism dollars in New York's 17th Congressional District, showing that protecting species can go hand in hand with supporting local economies. Each year, thousands of visitors come through their gates, and they leave not just informed, but inspired. Last week, staff from the local Congressional office, Republican office, visited with the wolves and hopes to return when the pups are born. With plans to expand, including a new education center and overnight experiences, they are reimagining how people engage with this often misunderstood species. Finally, in Florida, the Sea Turtle Conservancy is also touching hearts and minds and supporting local economies. With supervised turtle walks during nesting season and a vibrant education center, a Florida sea turtle license that raises over $1 million per year for sea turtle conservation, they are inspiring a powerful constituency for this beautiful marine species while supporting Florida's $5.6 billion wildlife viewing economy. As we look to the future, I'm hopeful. With support from the public and Congress, the Endangered Species Act will continue to drive the recovery of our most vulnerable species. I'm especially grateful to Representatives Beyer and Buchanan for introducing legislation today, this Earth Day, to protect wildlife corridors. Passage of this new bill and other proactive legislation combined with a strong Endangered Species Act will ensure that species like red wolves and tiny little piping plovers will thrive for generations to come. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan, for all those inspiring stories. And I think we all look to animals with so much love and admiration, and we have to do our best to protect all the species. And I think one species that might end up on the list is us, so we really have to do our best when it comes to all these issues. Our last speaker of the day is someone who I hope you all can pay some close attention to. There's this really great group called Mom's Clean Air Force that does a lot of work mobilizing mom power and getting their full force on the fight against polluted air. And we have with us a special member of the Kids Clean Air Force who is a big climate champion and super well respected amongst the climate community. I'd love to introduce Margot. Please, the floor is yours. Can we get the mic close to her?
Hi, my name is Margot, and I'm a member of Kids Clean Air Force. And I love my silly kitty, Rocco. But I'm here to talk about Earth Day. Why do I care about Earth Day? Because I love the Earth. I love playing outside. I love playing basketball and swimming outside. I love the trees and flowers and animals, and I love clean air. Do you breathe air? I bet you like clean air too. The air around my house and school isn't always clean. I live in a town that's near more data centers than anywhere else, and they make dirty, gross pollution that goes into our air. Sometimes smoke from wildfires comes from far away too. It hurts to breathe the smoke. I am a swimmer, and I need to be able to breathe clean air to swim with my summer team. But practices have been canceled because it isn't healthy to breathe outside. My friends and I like to play outside, but sometimes it's too hot and we have to stay inside. My mom says it didn't always used to be this hot in the summer. I worry about all the animals outside who don't have a place to go when it gets hot. Earth Day is to celebrate what makes Earth so amazing. Did you see the photo that the astronauts took when they were in space? That was cool. That's where we live, and adults should make sure we treat it with love. Kids like me rely on adults like you to keep us safe. I want to be able to play outside. For Earth Day, please keep us safe from things like pollution so we can play, have fun outdoors, and be healthy.
So when are you going to run for president? That was amazing. And I hope that note really inspires everyone to embody what this is all about. You know, I remember being like a youth climate activist or whatever, you know, and thinking about what this means for future generations. But those generations are here, and they're really changing the world, and we're changing the world for them. What actions we take will fundamentally decide what happens. And I would love, Margot, for you to be able to go to swim practice and play outside and do all the things that you love to do. And I'm sorry that so many adults don't get it. But we're working on that, and that's why we're here today. And you know, while there are so many things going wrong with climate policy across the country and on social justice and so many other issues, it's people like you all in this room that are doing the work every single day, organizing, mobilizing, creating campaigns, gathering data, fighting in your communities, fighting for those without voices, fighting for land, fighting for environmental justice, fighting for air, fighting all these fights simultaneously. And it's coalitions like these that I believe can fundamentally alter the course of what policy looks like, can alter the course of what happens to our world. And I hope on this Earth Day that you don't just doom scroll on your phone feeling bad about everything else going wrong in the world. Please take this moment to appreciate your own power and to continue to organize and galvanize, because as we saw today, there are so many elected officials that do care. And if we continue that fight and we continue to mobilize and we continue to vote and we continue democracy and trusting in the way that we can change things, I truly believe that they can. So everyone, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to SEEK, the Sustainable Energy and Environment Coalition. Thank you to all of our incredible partners, and happy Earth Day.